Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Chris Delaney, COBB VP of Marketing and Corporate Communications. We have an exciting webinar planned for all of you today. And at that, I will like to hand it over to Tim Jarrell, COBB Vice President of Power Supply, Rates, and DER Strategy, to go over current and future information on the electric vehicle industry.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Let's talk about the bipartisan infrastructure law first. I'm sure most of you heard that there was a lot of money that was allocated to the adoption of electric vehicles. And that law passed last year. And as part of that law, if you go to the next slide, Krista, there was money allocated to have 500,000 EV chargers by the end of this decade. Also, there was money allocated to the states, and Georgia being one of those, which got allocated $134 million over the next 5 years. And that's going to be managed by the Department of Transportation. And each state, as part of this law, has to submit an EV plan by August 1st of this year. So the state of Georgia will be working endlessly to determine, with input of many, on what that EV infrastructure plan looks like for the next 5 years in order to get these allocated dollars. So that's great news for the state of Georgia. That's a pretty big allocation. Georgia's been kind of one of the leading states in EV adoption. So good to see the money coming this way to continue to help with that. It also provides about $2.5 billion for communities and corridors and rural charging, and EV adoption in rural areas and disadvantaged communities. So that's really gaps in our state where there really needs to be some more EV charging infrastructure, not necessarily in the urban areas, but definitely some big benefit there in the rural areas. We can go to the next slide. So with this, there's also going to be dollars in, as you would expect, with the growth of electric vehicles, the battery minerals and refined materials that go into electric vehicles, but also grants aimed at building, retooling, manufacturing facilities, produce batteries and battery components. There's also $200 million focus on making electric vehicle batteries easier to recycle. I mean, as you have EV adoption and more electric vehicles, being produced and more people driving them down the road, there needs to be some recycling efforts and things to do with those batteries when they've hit their useful life. And then a $750 million in advanced energy manufacturing to really expand and establish facilities so that they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that produce some of this equipment. So a lot of things in this infrastructure plan. There's a lot of things still need to be worked out on how the dollars will be allocated, who can apply for the grants and all that. So we'll see a lot of that advancement in the next 6 months or so. And we can go to the next slide. So there's a lot of EV technology out there. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the announcements by some of the big manufacturers. If you watched the Super Bowl, you saw a lot of EV ads during the Super Bowl. That's because EV adoption is accelerating. There's a lot more models coming out. A lot of manufacturers have made goals by 2030 that all they're going to sell or electric vehicles, such as Honda and Mercedes-Benz. They're all looking to have by 2030, 40% of all their sales global wide will be electric vehicles. Goals of just selling electric vehicles, not even having combustion engine vehicles anymore. So there's a lot of manufacturer goals out there over the next decade and beyond of moving toward electric vehicles. With that, you're going to have a lot of manufacturers producing the materials. You're going to see an increase in fleets, big companies moving to electric vehicle fleets. So there'll be a lot more manufacturing of fleet vehicles from vans, etc. And so a lot's going to happen over the next 10 years. We can go to the next slide. So with this, there's really 3 ways to charge. One is charge at your home. Put a level 2 charger in your garage. You can buy a level 2 charger from a variety of places. You can get an electrician to come and install those. Also, if you live in an apartment, I think over time we're going to see more and more apartment complexes put EV chargers in as a convenience for their tenants, along with employers putting in chargers for their employees. Here at COBB, we've got public facing chargers from the level 3 and level 2. but we also have chargers that are available to our employees that are within our gates. And so we've got charging both for public and employees. And we'll see more and more of that with employers as more of their employees, adopt EVs and drive their EVs back and forth to work. And then there's on the go, traveling, short or long distances for pleasure or work outside of your normal work area. Then that's going to be big. You're going to want the infrastructure there to meet those charging requirements. You're going to see EVs have longer ranges, so you're not charging as often. But I think the key thing here for on-the-go charging is it really needs to be fast charging. If you're going to take a vacation down to South Georgia, for example, you're not going to want to stop at a level 2 charger and spend hours, getting a charge. You're going to stop at a fast charger to get a pretty quick charge and get you to your destination. So I think that's where those dollars from the bipartisan bill are going to be very important in enhancing that infrastructure, especially with the fast charging. We can go to the next slide. So some interesting stats on COBB in Georgia. So right now there's close to 30,000 EVs in Georgia, and that's in the last 6 months. We've increased by a few thousand, and we're closer to 0.4% of all Georgia vehicles are electric. So that continues to grow. And then 133 out of 158 counties have less than 100 EVs. I think that number's a little bit better now, but we'll see those numbers change over time as the EV adoption continues to accelerate. Interesting thing for COBB is we serve 5 counties, and those 5 counties that we serve have some of the highest adoption of EVs in the state. We go to the next slide. So here you can see almost 12,000 EVs in the 5 counties that we serve, with Fulton County kind of leading the way. But we're seeing Cobb County adoption accelerate as well. We think we've got about 3,300 EVs in the COBB service territory. We get that from registration data. We get that from member surveys. We get that from members when they sign up for service, asking if they have an EV. But we also can get that from looking at nighttime load profiles. If you've got, peaks at night, it's mostly going to be you're charging an electric vehicle is a common reason for that. So all that data we can use, and we kind of estimate we've got about 3,300. We've got over 1,000 members are on NITEFLEX rate, which is our time of use rate. That is great for not only electric vehicles charging at night, but also if you can shift your load. We can go to the next slide. So what is COBB doing really to preparing for EV adoption? So we have an incentive program where you can get $250 off a charger, a home installed charger, to help with your EV charging. That is a level 2 charger. We are also talking to commercial and large power businesses, on are there any gaps for charging, that we need to work with the business partners on how we can help you, fill that gap. We also look in our service territory. Are there gaps in our service territory that would make sense for there to be additional chargers? We're talking to commercial members what their fleet plans may be. It'd be important to know if your Amazons or others are looking to move to an all-electric fleet over the next 1, 2, 3, or 5 years, so we can help prepare for that, but also help them figure out the right solution for that. We're also working with other EMCs in the state of Georgia. How do we fill charging gaps in the whole state? For example, I know we've got COBB members that like to vacation either in the mountains or at the beach, and we want them to be able to drive their electric vehicle to the mountains or to the beach. Well, in order to do that, you're going to leave COBB service territory, and it'd be great to have some EMC charger network that you can stop by and charge, to make it to your destination. We also have a lot of information on our website that talks about EVs, and how to help you make that decision about EVs, and talks about chargers. So we also have trusted EV advisors that you can reach out to if you've got questions. So we're trying to be that EV advisor to you. We're also looking at our service territory. As EV adoption grows, there is no concern or fear that the grid's not going to be able to handle it, because you plan ahead for your distribution grid in preparing for load growth, and EV adoption could definitely provide some load growth. So with that, we look at transformers and all the equipment across our service territory, and are there upgrades that we need to make as EV adoption, continues to grow. So that's all part of our planning process for any load growth. EVs are no exception. So we have no concerns in being able to support, whatever EV adoption we get in our service territory and preparing our grid for that. And we're also adding EVs to our operational fleet, to understand, their uses and how they can save money, in our fleet cost, and just learning about the different EVs. And as you know, we have a member experience program that you can check out one of our EVs at some point. I think we still got it on hold because of COVID, but when it's available, you can check out an EV and be able to drive it and find out what different EVs feel like. And we can go to the next slide. So as mentioned, we're looking at our service territory and distribution, what we can do to prepare the grid and be prepared for the load growth. We're also looking at in our service territory any gaps that we may need to, help fill from public charging and offering incentives for home and commercial, to help fill the gaps. We're evaluating our system equipment where we need to make updates, again, to the increased load to the EVs. And then we're also planning for long-term power supply. One thing that we look, that we're very proud of is we've got very low rates and stable power supply for the long term. We do a very good job in having long-term power contracts from our G&T generation transmission cooperative, but also outside of our G&T. And that is no exception here, that we will continue to look for very low cost, long-term power supply to meet any load growth that may come from electric vehicles. So that's very important for us for a diversified portfolio, but also meeting our sustainability goals by 2030, which is a 200% increase in our renewable energy and a 75% reduction in our carbon footprint. So we can make all that happen together and be able to meet the increased adoption of the electric vehicles, which will result in increased kilowatt hours. So that's some of the things we're doing. And I think that is it for me, and I would turn it back over. Oh, I did miss one. My apologies. EV trends. So down the road, there's going to be a lot that's going to happen. You got your tailwinds and your headwinds. Certainly, if gas continues to increase, as oil prices continue to increase, you could see an accelerated adoption of EVs. As more bills are passed that may provide dollars to build out the networks and the infrastructure, that will help with EV adoption. As more rates are available to make charging low cost, for example, like our NITEFLEX rate, where you've got 400 kilowatt hours free at night, that certainly as more utilities come out, those types of rates, that will certainly help. As financing is creative and low cost for investment in EV infrastructure, as companies move to EV fleets, more bipartisan support up in the federal level, to support programs, all those things will help with EV adoption. Some of your headwinds is, having enough variety of EVs that are cool, so to speak, that people have interest in, making sure that the supply chain woes, at some point settle down so you can actually get the materials you need for the electric vehicles. The pricing of electric vehicles need to be affordable, for the majority of Americans to go out there and buy one. Understanding, the difference in EVs and combustion engines, the pros and cons, and then just putting the same technology and smart technology in the electric vehicles that people become accustomed to in the combustion engine vehicles. So you've got your tailwinds, headwinds. Things can change very quickly depending on market conditions, but I think there's a lot of good tailwinds that will help with EV adoption and a lot of benefits of electric vehicles now and down the road. And I believe that was my last slide. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing that interesting information regarding the electric vehicle landscape. Before introducing the next speaker, I do want to first introduce myself. My name is Lauren Owens. I am COBB's Consumer Marketing Specialist and will be facilitating the rest of our webinar today. Our next speaker is Alan Shedd, the Director of Emerging Technologies at Oglethorpe Power Corporation. Alan's going to be sharing some insights on electric vehicles and the chargers that are available to the public today.
Thanks, Lauren. So let's jump into this. So next slide. Tim shared a lot of information about what's coming, about the infrastructure law, about new models. And one question we hear a lot is, well, how long does an EV last? What's the life cycle? What do we need to be concerned about here? So, to start with, most electric vehicles have a long warranty, typically 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on the battery. There's less maintenance involved because there are just fewer moving parts in an EV. In my own case, my first electric vehicle, I went over 120,000 miles before replacing the brake pads, just because the motor does most of the work in stopping the car through regenerative braking. There's an EV in Germany that recently topped 1.5 million kilometers. That's almost 1 million miles of driving. So, to expect an EV can travel 1 million miles during its lifetime is not unreasonable. You probably get tired of the car and look for something else before it actually wears out. And even when it does, oftentimes that battery, even though it may not be quite as good as it was when it was new at propelling your car, it could be recycled or even better used in what we call a second life. You could take that battery out and use it in some stationary application. So less impact on landfills, on the impact of driving and owning an electric vehicle. Let's go to the next slide. So another thing we hear a lot is, well, what about range? You hear the term range anxiety, and I don't really like the term because as an EV owner, I don't really have range anxiety. I've come to understand what the limitations are and how to adjust, my lifestyle to fit it. But to put it in perspective, if we were to go back 12 years to 2010, the best-selling electric vehicle on the market, the Nissan Leaf, had a 100-mile range. And at the time, that was like, wow, that's phenomenal. Fast forward 10 years, the median range for electric vehicles sold is over 250 miles. So in the span of 10 years, we've gotten a lot more capability out of today's crop of electric vehicles. And in fact, now there are vehicles on the market that, one in particular, the Lucid Air has an EP range of 520 miles per charge. So lots of capability there. With the deployment of more charging infrastructure, as Tim mentioned, you'll be able to travel pretty much anywhere you want, even if you can't make it in a single charge, a quick stop and adding a few kilowatt hours to your battery and back on the road. And the time it takes to go to the restroom, grab a Coke or a burger, you'll be ready to roll again. Next slide. So what about the cars? What about the ranges and the costs? Here's just a snapshot. As Tim mentioned, every automobile manufacturer in the world is introducing electric vehicle models. It's estimated that there'll be over 130 new models coming to the market by 2024. Now, all of those won't be available here in Georgia. Georgia doesn't really have access to all those. And you'll hear later from Chris Campbell, one of our presenters. He maintains a really great information sheet that talks about what models are here in Georgia. And some of this information was taken from his sheet. But just to give you a sense of what's available here, you'll see the Nissan Leaf, for example. There's several different models. The base model has a range of about 150 miles per charge, up to about 226 miles per charge. And you can buy that base model for $27,000. Now that little asterisk you see there means that's before application of the federal tax credit. There's a $7,500 federal tax credit. And if your tax situation allows, you could be driving that car for less than 20K. Looking at some of the other models, you see the Kia Niro there for around 40K, the Volkswagen ID4. Production of that car will start in Chattanooga later this year. The Mach-E Mustang, great car, interesting performance, good range up to 300 miles, still in 44K range. Seems to be kind of the sweet spot right now. All these prices, by the way, are manufacturer's MSRP. Do some shopping around, see what's available. Tesla Model S, you can see there, And then the one I mentioned before, that's right now the range leader, the Lucid Air, up to 516 miles on the EPA rating, starting price of $78K. I think that that longer range model is going to cost you probably closer to $90,000. But lots of options here. Let's go to the next slide. Pickups are something that we're all really excited about, and you can see there are a lot of different models, both currently available and coming soon to a dealership near you. The Rivian R1T, $66,000 price, 300-mile range. We've all heard about the GMC Hummer. They built a few of them this past year. Pretty expensive truck, but if you want a beast like that with that kind of power and range, it's available now. Tesla Cybertruck, been on the way for a lot of years now. We'll see when it's actually going to hit the market. Ford Lightning F-150 is probably the most talked about pickup, maybe the most talked about EV last year, at the end of last year. Lots of capability, 300-mile range, starting price of $40K. So pretty reasonable. Others on the way, you may have seen the ad for the Chevy Silverado in the Super Bowl, last Sunday. Also, Ram is reported to be working on one as well. Now, a little bit of a note here. These are all new car prices. I'd encourage you also to look at used car prices, used EV prices. Unfortunately, because of chip shortage and limitations on availability of cars, used EV prices have held up quite high. So you may end up paying almost as much for a used EV as you would a new one. The difference is you can pick it up today and take it home with you and start saving on your energy bill. You also might want to look at leasing. If leasing works for you, there's some great deals. I saw one recently for $199 a month for an EV on a lease. That's pretty reasonable, especially when you consider how much you'd save each month, on gasoline just driving electric. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about charging. I know Tim covered this. I wanted to go into a couple more details here just for calibration's sake. There are different levels of charging, and every electric vehicle comes with a charging cord called a level 1 cord. Level 1, that just means it plugs into a standard 120 volt outlet. Now, that's pretty slow at charging your car. It adds about 5 miles of driving range for every hour you're plugged in. But it's simple to use. And if you don't drive much, if you only drive about 40 miles a day, that may be adequate. For most folks, though, next slide, you'd probably want to consider a level 2 residential charger. These plug into a 240 volt outlet. They're available in a variety of sizes and capacities. Typically they add about 25 to 30 miles of driving range for every hour of charging. So plugging in your car at night, taking advantage of COBB NITEFLEX rate, you can charge your car for essentially free if you charge it during their super off-peak periods. The cost of that charger somewhere between $450 and $700. And then depending on your house, the installation cost is going to add to that as well. Next slide. And then commercial, we talked, Tim mentioned public charging or workplace charging. There are lots of different chargers available there. They're very similar to the residential models, just maybe a little more robust and as a result, a little more expensive, typically in the $5,000 to $10,000, cost for those level 2 commercial chargers. And lastly, on the next slide, we can talk about fast charging. So these are chargers that, you're not going to put one of these in your home, obviously. They run at 480 volts, 3-phase power. They put a lot of power into your car during a short period of time. And they come in a variety of sizes. The largest one we're seeing now being installed is about 350 kW. And it can add about 300 miles of range in 15 minutes of charging. Now, your speed's going to vary a little bit. The amount you can take depends on the car, depends on the state of charge, the weather, a bunch of different factors. That's just a a ballpark number there. But, you know, as you can see, if you were taking a long trip and you just make a short stop, you can take on a lot of electricity in a short period of time and get you to your destination pretty quickly without much of a delay. Next slide. Well, that's it for me. I'll be available for the Q&A, but let me turn it back over to you, Lauren, for the next presenter.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing more information about what electric vehicles and chargers are on the market today. Our next speaker is going to be Krista Williams, COBB EMC's Consumer Marketing Coordinator. She will be sharing COBB EMC's electric vehicle resources with you all, as well as how and where to charge your electric vehicle. Krista?
Thanks, Lauren. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to have you with us today. And COBB EMC is always here for you to be your trusted EV partner, as Tim mentioned during his slides. So as Lauren said, I'm going to be covering a few of the resources we have available to you so that whether you're considering getting an EV, maybe you already have one and are looking to kind of take the next steps with your EV, we're here to support you wherever you are along your journey. So the first slide I have here is actually a screenshot of our COBB EMC EV Resource Center. And you can see the URL at the top of the slide there. It's just cobbemc.com/EV. It's very easy to find. And on our website, we have our resources organized for you there very similarly to how I just mentioned. Whether you're considering getting an EV, maybe you already have one, or you're looking for additional resources. I did build into the slide here just a quick little scroll through so you could see. Specifically, I was navigating to the gas versus electric comparison tool. And this is actually something that we link out to on our site. It lives with the Department of Energy. And you can see as we're kind of clicking through here on the slide, you can put in what you currently drive. For the example, I just used a 2017 Toyota Corolla, and you can put in potentially the EV that you're interested in. This website's equipped with a lot of different models. So whether you're looking to maybe buy an older model, like Alan said, if you go the used car route, or if you're looking for something new, you can put in some information, set what the current price of gas is. I know it's very volatile and very high right now, and then actually hit to go ahead and compare. And once you do that, you'll see what the potential savings could look like with an electric vehicle. So I know for a lot of people, yes, there's definitely an environmental motivation behind EVs. You know, some people want them just because they're fun to drive and they're the new cutting edge technology. But for a lot of people, this, you know, the savings is a big comparison here. So you can see we're clicking through, talking about what your annual mileage is. You know, you can toggle based on what your daily commute is. And then you'll see that it kind of spits out your report here, and there's different graphs that you can click into as well, which is super interesting. So again, just wanted to highlight that resource for you. Another thing we wanted to talk about, and this is kind of transitioning in, especially for people who have made the switch and have started to drive electric, is COBB EMC's NITEFLEX rate, which Alan alluded to a bit. And what this is a time of use rate that we offer to our members. And what that means is the cost that we'll charge you for electricity is going to be different based on the time of day. So you can see from the chart that we have what we call the super off-peak, and on-peak pricing. And if you're able to shift when you're using electricity to those off-peak and especially the super off-peak hours, you're able to save. And this is really great for electric vehicle owners because our super off-peak is from midnight to 6 a.m. So what you can do if you're on this rate is have your electric vehicle set to charge. You can program that in your car. It'll actually start charging during that time so that you could take advantage of the 400 kilowatt hours that we offer for free as a part of that rate. So again, anytime I talk to an EV owner, whether that's out in the community or at an event, if they don't know about that rate, that's always one of the first things I tell them. It's a really great opportunity for our members. And you can go to learn more at the URL there on the slide, which is just cobbemc.com/NITEFLEX. Another thing that Alan hit on in his slides too was the difference between the level 1 and level 2 charger. And he mentioned that, you know, sometimes you have to do a little extra work to get that level 2 charger in your home. And the reason for that is the outlet. It's the difference between the 120 and the 240 volt. So while yes, some EV manufacturers now They'll sell you the level 2 charger at the time of purchase. Another thing that you may have to do is have an electrician come out to make sure that your garage or the exterior of your home is equipped for that. So to help with this, both the purchase of the charger itself and the installation, COBB created an incentive program that we have available through our energy network. And what that does is provides you with $250 off the cost of either or both the charger and the installation, just based on the needs that you have, and if the charger was included with your car and if the electrical work is needed or not. We have plenty of incentives still available for this year. So if that's something that you're interested in, whether you're looking to get an EV for the first time, or maybe you have one and you've kind of been just doing the level 1 charging, but have been on the fence about level 2, we hope that this is a valuable program to you. And, it really helps you as the member be able to make that switch. But part of that program for COBB is the energy network. We network with our members who are involved so that we can learn about these renewable energy technologies even more, so that we can be a better resource to other members who are thinking about making the switch as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, the URL is there as well. It's just cobbmc.com/charge, and you can find information there about all the qualifications and what you need to do to go ahead and get started if you're interested. Another big part of charging, obviously a lot of people will charge at home, but part of it is charging on the go too. And this image is from PlugShare, and this is linked through our EV Resource Center as well. I also put the direct URL on the screen for you all. And I took a screenshot of the area kind of around our office. And what PlugShare is kind of a map that's maintained by the larger community, where EV charging stations appear. You can see ones that are planned for the future. You can see ones that are already in existence and if they're available at the given time you're searching or not. And based on where you're going, you can map out your route using this resource. So it's a really great one if you're thinking about an EV and kind of want to see what the current charging landscape looks like. And what I wanted to point out to you is on this map right here, this is actually COBB's level 3 EV charger. This is located on our campus. And the last slide that I'm going to leave you with is actually a video. We wanted to show you what it's like if you've never charged at a charge point unit specifically, because that's the type of charger we have. It's a charge point fast charger, what you need to do to get started. And also, I think the first time I charged an EV, it's not that scary, but it's always helpful to kind of know what to expect that first time. So like I said, I'll play the video and then I'll hand it back to Lauren after that. But we just wanted to show you what that experience is like and let you know that that's a destination that's free and open to our members. So with that, I'll go ahead and play it for you.
COBB has a solar flower garden on our campus located at 1000 EMC Parkway. The garden features 3 solar smart flowers, as well as a level 3 electric vehicle charging station that is free for our members to use to charge their EVs. If you've never visited a charge point station before, you'll need to create an account, so we'll walk through this process together. Once you arrive, you'll want to start by opening the port on your car so that you're ready to charge. Then, walk over to the station and you'll see that you need to open an app. If you haven't already, go ahead and download this from the App Store on your phone. You'll then be prompted to complete several settings and setup requirements. You can say how you plan to charge your EV. You'll be asked to add a payment method, though note our station is free for members to use. And you'll be able to create a charging pass card that you can add to your Apple Wallet for easy access. You can select for it to be automatically selected each time, and you'll also be prompted if you'd like to allow push notifications and enter information about your electric vehicle. Note that if you'd like to disclose this information or not is totally up to you, and it can be done at a later time if needed. Once you've followed all of the prompts on screen, you'll see that you're ready to charge. You can browse ChargePoint's map of all the stations in your area, or you can go ahead and tap your charging pass to the station to start your session. It's as easy as that. You'll notice that on the side of the charging station, there are 2 plugs. By looking at them visually, you'll be able to tell which is a better fit for your car. Based on the make and model of your vehicle, you may need an adapter, but this one fits the Mustang Mach-E just fine without an adapter needed. Plug up and you'll see that the station is now in use. While you're charging, feel free to explore the space and learn more about renewable energy. When you're ready to leave and your charging session is done, close back the port on your car and return the plug to the station. You'll notice that it now says available at the top so that the next member knows it's open if they would like to use it. We hope this video was helpful to you so that you can plan your first charging session and visit to our solar flower garden. We hope that you'll stop by soon. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you, Krista. Now we are going to move on to our EV owners panel. As I introduce our three panelists today, I do invite them to turn their microphones and cameras on. Our first panelist is Kristen Delaney, COBB EMC's Vice President of Marketing and Corporate Communications, and she does drive a Tesla Model 3. Our second panelist is Chris Campbell, who is a project manager at Sonnen Inc. and a member of the EV Group of the South. He currently drives an Audi e-tron Sportback, but has had several different EVs in the past. And our third panelist is John Cameron, COBB EMC's Manager of Power Control, and he drives a Nissan Leaf. So first, I do want to thank all three of you for being part of our panel today. And for our first question, I am going to start with Kristen and move down the line. So Kristen, our first question is, why did you choose to get an electric vehicle?
Well, the timing was good. I had a minivan for 20 years that had served its purpose and was filled with too many Cheerios. And so it was time for a new car. And I really felt like working at the power company and needing to be an advocate for members and understanding how they would be using the car. It was really an imperative. So, for me, I'm a soccer mom. I've got 3 kids that play club soccer throughout the state and the Southeast. So it was a really good way for me on a weekly basis to really test the limits of range and usage for the car, so I could be a better advisor.
Thank you, Kristen. Chris, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why did you choose to purchase the EVs you have?
So I am an electrical engineer, and so 10, 12 years ago, I saw that this wave was coming. The first cars started coming out, starting with the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf. And I decided, because I was an engineer and I was familiar with electric motors and the efficiency and a lot of technical things, that I felt like I wanted to get out in front and take the lead and just show people that these were normal cars. But another major reason was that in the early days, Tesla was the company at the time, but they were a startup. They were barely surviving, and they had a little sports car called the Roadster, the original old Roadster. And I had a chance to test drive that, and it blew my mind. It was so powerful. It was such a thrill to drive. It was just like this religious experience, like, oh my God, I'm not going to get a Tesla because I can't afford a $120,000 car. But at the time, the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf had come out. They're both fun cars to drive. All electric cars to drive are fun to drive. And so for me, it was really about the thrill. They're really fun. They're kind of stealthy dragsters. And then there was also the environmental aspect. If you look at research that's been done on it, even if you count the emissions of the power plant, electric cars are cleaner to drive. They're much cleaner than gas cars. And, if you're comparing your average electric car to your average gas car, again, that electric car is a lot more fun. A Nissan Leaf is honestly a lot more fun to drive than a Toyota Prius. And so it kind of links together. It's a cleaner car, but it's a lot of fun. And there's also geopolitics of oil and not wanting to, spend money on oil and all that stuff. So those are the kind of the major reasons for it. I did it a long time ago, and I'm now, 12 years into this.
Well, thank you, Chris. And John, same question. What prompted you to choose your electric vehicle?
So my situation is similar to Chris Delaney, that 3 years ago, I was in need. My previous vehicle was about to break down. I needed a new vehicle. So I did a lot of research in EVs. I was always interested before in hybrids and EVs. Ultimately, I chose to pick an EV, and I found a really good deal in the Nissan Leaf, the one I'm currently driving. And it wasn't a vehicle I needed for long road trips or nothing like that. It was just a daily commuter that I was looking for. So even though mine was that 100-mile range that Alan was talking about before, it fit perfect in what I needed for that daily commuter.
Well, thank you, John. I am going to move on to our second question. I am going to continue with my pattern. So I'm going to start with Kristen. Kristen, what is your favorite part about owning your electric vehicle?
I'd say it's really two part. I love the fact that because it's it's a motor and it's not a an engine where I've got gears that have to mesh. That immediate response when you need it is really nice, especially in traffic like we have here in Atlanta, when you need to accelerate for safety, especially when the big trucks are hogging the lane. You know it's there, there's no lag. And that's one of the biggest surprises. But that's also one of the things, you know, I've got some little kids, you know, and they sit in the back, and when you accelerate like that and it pins them in their seat for a minute, I'm the cool mom. So that's pretty fun too.
Thank you, Kristen. Same question for Chris. What is your favorite part of owning your EV?
Yeah, man, she got the first one right there. I said it before and she just repeated it. The thrill of that silent power. You know, if you have a sports car, if you have like a muscle car, a Camaro or a souped up Mustang, it is a gas Mustang. You know, if you step on the accelerator, you're making a lot of noise and you're announcing to the whole neighborhood, certainly all the cars on the street, that you're accelerating, and you can get away with really, you know, you're quietly pulling away from that intersection. It is so much fun. And like Chris said, I mean, if a spot opens up in traffic, you can be there quickly. If you have to get away from something, you can do it really quickly, and it's all silent. And so, I mean, noisy cars are fun. You know, I sometimes miss the sound of a big V8 engine, but another thing was, I mean, I like being, you know, in the early years, I was on the bleeding edge, and I don't normally adopt bleeding edge technologies. I still don't have an Alexa. You know, I don't have the latest phone, but for this thing, I really like this one expensive thing, you know, buying a car is not cheap. I liked being on the leading edge. And of course, I talked about wanting to spread the word, because it really is a groundbreaking technology. And the third thing that I really like about it is spending my money locally as far as the energy. When you buy gas, you're buying it from a company that's producing it at best somewhere in the United States, but possibly overseas. You know, it's imported energy. Georgia does not produce any oil, does not produce any gas. So you are spending that money and sending it out of state. And when you buy electricity, that electricity is produced locally. It might be a coal plant, and even then the car is still going to be cleaner, but it is locally produced energy, and I like spending it locally.
Thank you, Chris. Same question for you, John. What is your favorite part of owning your Nissan Leaf?
I think the answer here all the time is not having to go to the gas station, but for me, it's the reduction of maintenance on the vehicle. I grew up working on cars, helping my dad work on cars, and in the 3 years I've owned this Nissan Leaf, I mean, the only thing I've had to do is put a set of tires on it. That's the only true maintenance I've had done. So for me, it would have to be just that reduction of yearly, every 3 months, going to get in that oil change, that maintenance that is ingrained in me. That was a huge change for me.
Well, thank you all for answering that question, because I do really feel like it helps our audience see some of the many positives of owning an electric vehicle. Our third question is, what did you wish you knew before getting an EV, or advice you'd like to share with those listening today? And Kristen, I'm going to start with you again.
Sure. You know, I was aware of it, and I know Krista mentioned it earlier in her slides, but the PlugShare app really answers that kind of unknown, like where can I charge, you know, other than maybe your work having a charger or installing a charger at home. It really kind of reminded me of when we first got cell phones, and it's a behavior change, right? It's just planning ahead to make sure you have a full charge. Like, you're always going to make sure your phone has a full charge before you get on an airplane, right? So it's just making sure that you plan depending on what your plans are. And so on the PlugShare app, you can put in where you are, where you're going, what your destination is, and it'll help you plan where you need to charge along the way. And I use it all the time. Like I said, I'm traveling all over the Southeast. And what's been really nice over the last 3 years is that there have been more and more chargers installed throughout the state and the Southeast. So some of those areas that maybe made me a little bit nervous, like 16 going to the coast, there are many more chargers there than there used to be. And I would recommend anyone who wants to try that. There's a great charger in Metter, and there's a great barbecue place next door. So while you charge for 30 minutes, you can feed the family, get back in the car and go. It's great. And I would say the other thing I wasn't aware of for the Tesla specifically is that the Tesla has an app on your phone. So I can unlock, lock, set valet mode, alter the amount of charging I want to do on the car. I can set the climate remotely. So when it's really hot outside and I know I'm about to leave, I can turn on the air conditioning. If it's really cold outside, I can put on the seat warmers, all from the app on my phone before I even go outside. And to me, that's super cool.
Thank you, Kristen. So Chris, what about you?
Yeah, so Alan touched on it earlier. I do a lot of, since I was been doing this for a long time, I was having to explain this, a lot of things to new people. And so I created a website, electrifyatlanta.com, to kind of collect this information. And I would say that there's top 3 things that I have to tell people right away. Not all of the cars are available in Georgia. So you might hear about, like, I know a lot of friends that are fans of Subaru, and they're like all excited about the Subaru plug-in hybrid, or maybe Subaru has an electric. And I have to disappoint them and say, that's not coming to Georgia. There's some legislation and drama involved, but basically California gets all the cars, and we get some of them. A lot of these new cars, certainly the ones that were advertised on the Super Bowl, they're going to be nationwide. But if you have your heart set on a particular car, it might not actually be available in Georgia. So don't get wedded to that and then just give up on the whole concept. The second thing is making sure, and we touched on this many times already, but making sure that people understand that you do most of your charging at home. You're going to leave your house every day with a full tank. So we're talking, Krista just talked about plug share and charging stations and laps. That's for, the occasional road trip. But for most people, you're just going to plug it home at night. You plug in, takes 5 seconds, takes 5 seconds to unplug in the morning, and you start fully charged when you leave every day. And you get home, and it's just like your cell phone. You get your home with your cell phone, and your cell phone's at 2% battery. That's fine. You plug it in, and you just start the day over again the next day. So you don't have to use the public charging network. You can charge at home. And the last thing I would say is, this is kind of a technical detail, but how fast the charging works at a public station is different for different cars. The older cars charge at 50 kilowatts. The newer ones are 100, 150, 200. And that's that kind of 15-minute experience that Alan was talking about. But you only get that with the newer cars. And I tell people, if you want to use this car for road trips, I've driven my latest car to Florida, I can do road trips, but you need to make sure it charges at least 100 kilowatts. 50 kilowatts is not good enough to have a road trip that's tolerable.
Gotcha. So John, same question. What do you wish you would have known, or what advice would you like to share?
So for me, the one thing that took me by surprise once I purchased my vehicle was how much the weather can affect the range on the miles you can drive. It's, when it's colder, you're going to see a decrease in miles. When it gets that spring, fall, that's the optimal time. So it was interesting to see that when I purchased the vehicle first thing. And for the first year or so, like Chris is talking about, I was charging at home with a 120 charger. I would charge at work, but if I needed to charge at home, I would charge it overnight. 120 charger worked great for me for a while, but then just being busy and going to different places, I took that investment and put a level 2 charger in, and the amount of time it saved was dramatic. I mean, you can get home, plug it in, 2 hours later, you almost fully charged, you're ready to go again. So it cut that down to where I was, because with a 100-mile range, there was a little bit, not anxiety, but you had to plan ahead for everything you were doing, to where that eased that up dramatically for me. So.
Okay, and then I actually do our last question. I am going to send it to John. I wanted to ask, what should our members be looking for when they are going to be purchasing a used electric vehicle?
So for me, doing that research, the biggest thing that I looked for was the battery life. It's not necessarily the amount of miles or range. It was the condition of the battery itself. So on my Nissan Leaf, it gives the range, but there's also another meter that marks it's 10 cells. What's the battery life cycle basically on that battery? And when doing the research, if you see anything with a decrease of 3 bars or more, it's at its later end of the battery life, and you're going to be looking for that investment of changing out the batteries in the future. So I came across this great deal. I mean, I only had one battery decrease. I've been driving it for 3 years, and I've had another cell fall off of that decrease. So to me, the biggest thing is do your research ahead of time, because I'm sure different models are going to be looking for different things. And just know what to look for, what you're expecting when purchasing a used vehicle.
Thank you. And Chris and Kristen, do either of you have anything you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah, I would say, this is a common question because, these new cars are expensive. And so used cars obviously an easier, cheaper way to get into the market. I would stick with what I call the big three. So there were 3 car makers that were early into the market, and there's lots of used inventory for them. And that's the Chevy Volt, maybe the Chevy Bolt too, but a Chevy, one of the 2 Chevy models, Nissan Leaf, which is what John was talking about, and the BMW i3. You see a lot of those in the used market. I wouldn't, and those are well supported in Georgia. So I would focus on those 3. And then for a particular car, they're not all the same. Some of them have a lot more features, or like the BMW i3 actually has a gas option. And so you need to make sure if you're comparing 2 different particular used cars that you're really comparing apples to apples, or at least you know what the differences are. And maybe the car is $2,000 more because it has, it's fully loaded and has all the technology features.
Thank you. And Kristen, do you have anything you'd like to add as well?
No, I haven't purchased a used one, so I haven't had to go through that process, but I think that's excellent advice about those three models for sure.
Well, I want to first thank all 3 of you for being part of our panel today and sharing your personal experience with our audience. I am going to go ahead and move into our Q&A because we do have quite a few questions. So the first question I actually am going to direct to Krista. Our member is asking, do you have an EV to install at home L2 charger and get the discount? They're trying to get ahead of the electrical work and discounts before they look into an EV.
Yeah, so our level 2 charger incentive is obviously, it's most useful if you do have an EV. We have had a few members that have applied for it. For example, if they have an EV on order and they know they're going to want that level 2 charging capability, they'll go ahead and request the incentive, get it installed, then it's ready when their new baby comes home, so to speak, with their EV. So if that's something that you're interested in, yes, you can go ahead and still apply. But obviously, right, it's ideal for EV owners too. So definitely open to that if you do want to go ahead and submit that application.
Thank you, Krista. So this one is going to be for Chris Campbell. What is the average cost of car insurance for an electric vehicle?
That is a good question. I think you can really base it on just on the price of the car. The drivetrain is similar, but usually when you're dealing with car insurance, you're dealing with collision damage, damage to the panels. The BMW i3 has kind of a weird body structure, so that could be a little bit more expensive. But I think if you just look at the MSRP of it and compare, so the BMW i3 ranges the MSRP new, so you look at that price. I think the entry price was around 45 and goes up to 55. So if your car now, if you're driving a $30,000 car, the insurance is going to be a little higher. And so that is certainly something that factored into, in my case, I've got a more expensive car. And so I'm spending $100 a month on average on just for insurance, but it's not huge. It's just, if you look at the MSRP, it's a more valuable car. It's going to be a little bit more expensive to fix.
Thank you. So our next question I'm going to direct to John. John, we do have an audience member that would like to know what year your Nissan Leaf is.
My year is 2015.
2015.
So it wasn't a 2010. It was one of the newer models. They had a couple of years and there was made some additions to it.
Thank you. And this next question is for Alan. Alan, someone is asking, what is the cost of a charger, assuming you need to use one outside the home? And what would be the cost of a full charge at the home?
So if I understand the question correctly, you're asking what would my cost be to recharge the vehicle, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So if you're charging at home, I mean, obviously in the case of COBB NITEFLEX rate, and you charge during your super off-peak period, your cost would be, essentially zero to recharge that car. That 400 free kilowatt hours is enough to power a car for about somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 miles or 1,600 miles, per month. But if you weren't on the NITEFLEX rate and you were paying, say a typical price of about, say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, let me back up a second and try to make this more complicated than it needs to be. The problem here is you don't typically have to completely fill the battery up. If you have a car that has a 300-mile range, you're not going to be adding 300 miles every time you plug it in. You're going to replace the energy that you use. So for Georgians, I mean, on average, this is from some data available, from the state, they estimate that a typical driver in rural Georgia drives about 57 miles a day. So if you were only adding that, you're only using about 16 kilowatt hours of electricity to recharge that vehicle. And at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's $1.60 to recharge your car. So pretty minimal.
Alan and
go ahead,
Lauren,
Chris.
I've got a really good answer to this because a lot of people don't understand kilowatt hours or how much they spend or how much their electricity costs. And so what I tell them is that whatever you're spending now on gas, if it's $100 a month, because you know how often you go to the gas station, you know how much it costs to fill your tank, whatever you're spending per month on gas, the rule of thumb is that the electricity to do that instead, to buy electricity instead, is about 1/3. So if you're spending $100 a month on gas, you're probably going to end up spending $33 more on your electric bill. So sure, your electric bill is going up, but your gas bill, your gasoline expenditure went down to zero. It's going to be cheaper if you're at COBB EMC and you've got that awesome NITEFLEX plan. And maybe it's a little more if in some cases, but it's a slashing of the price. It's much cheaper to drive on electric.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it, Chris. Obviously, even that differential is getting bigger now with the high cost of gasoline and fairly stable costs of electricity. The other part of the question was, well, what does it cost to charge, if you're using public charging? The cheapest place to recharge is at home. It's more convenient, it's less expensive. If you plug into a public charger, most of those chargers are it's going to cost probably twice as much, maybe 3 times as much. You're paying for convenience, you're paying for the cost of that station and the site host. So, charge at home when you can, charge in public when you have to.
I want to thank all of our speakers and our panelists today for participating and having such great information to share with our audience. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today.